Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Delara, and I am going to be talking about a number of different things today. I'm going to be talking about the key numbers in the NFL. We're in week 2 of the NFL season. I think this is critically important information for you guys to all have so you can pick off some of the best numbers, know when to wait, know when you need to bet right away, and so on and so forth. And there was a big meeting in the Massachusetts Gaming Commission about the limiting of bettors and the recreational use of some of these sports books. I want to peel back some of the layers of that onion there too. And obviously, we have a really cool WNBA slate for Thursday, single game slate. I do have a lean. I'm not entirely sure if I want to go that way, but I'm going to leave it out for you guys right off the rip. The one game that we have is a rematch between the Dallas Wings and the New York Liberty. We crushed on Breanna Stewart. We had her over 20 and a half points. We took the ladder in the huddle, and you guys can get the huddle for 6 months for $150, really $149.99. That's the way we do it. You guys are basically getting 1 month free. That's going to take you from now through the end of NFL season. That's going to take you right up to the NBA All-Star break. Great deal. You're going to get all my plays. You're going to get all that closing line value, and you're going to be getting everything first. We are working on a little bit of an NFL or an NBA package rather, but it's going to be obviously a little bit longer term. The price number is going to be a little bit different. And look, we know you guys want me for my NFL stuff or my NBA stuff rather, and it is it's going to be fun. We're going to be getting a lot of that good value, and instead of putting it on Twitter first, where it's free for everybody, we are really trying to accommodate the people that are truly want to support me, truly want to also make their own money. And I think the best way to put it is, look, if you're $100 better, we bet on things that are plus 100. When I put that line out, that one line is going to go to, if not jump to the next number, it's going to go to minus 130, minus 140, whatever. You're $100 better. One bet literally paid for itself. So the bet and, the link for all of this stuff is going to be in the bio here. Hop in there. And at the very minimum, if you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever it is, subscribe, appreciate all of that. It really helps me out, even if you don't want to be a paying subscriber, because we still are putting all those bets out later, but you are going to miss out on a little bit of the CLV. So look, for this game between the New York Liberty and the Dallas Wings, I do like Breanna Stewart over 22 and a half points. It's a little bit of a lean. She just scored 25. I think that they are really trying to close out, secure the number 1 seed early. If I could get a first quarter points line, I would love it. I would love a first quarter points line. That would be my preferred way to bet Breanna Stewart, but the offerings for the W are just not the same as they are for the NBA. So that's kind of what we're working with. I like it. We went over 20 and a half. We hit 25 plus, scored 27 in the last outing. It was weird. It was like 27, 29, depending on the app you're using. But I think there must have been a mistake there. So it's settled at 27. But either way, do like it for Breanna Stewart over 22 and a half points. I hope it comes down to 21 and a half, just based on hit rate. People are gonna be like, oh, we got to go under, blah, blah, blah. But that's a little bit of what I'm looking at there for that one game on the W slate on Thursday. I do want to talk about key numbers first, and it's NFL season, and I'm putting out some plays in the huddle for the NFL. For those of you that know me, I'm not the biggest NFL bettor, but I am able to really kind of work with some of the lines that we're given and assess where are we getting some value, where are we going to be seeing a line that moves off of a number that's not really bettable. And I think that a lot of that is super important. Those are the things that matter when you're betting NFL, especially these sides and totals. And the lines come out, and then they have a week to mature. So sometimes you have the opportunity where you say this line is wrong. I need to bet it right now. And then there's other times where you say I think the public's going to come in this way, or I think there's going to be bet action coming in this way, and I'm going to want to grab it later. And that's one of the things and the intricacies of the NFL that's kind of unlike any other sport, because the lines are sitting out there And it's such a heavily bet market. It's such a heavily looked at market. The markets can really mature. They kind of age, if you will. And sometimes, books play this game, and there's this like adage, right? Like where like the books are like, oh, like the books want to get equal value or equal action on both sides. And that's like not really true. That's not exactly what people want to see. That's not exactly what the books are trying to do. A lot of times the books are taking a position based on their modeling. They believe that their modeling is better than everybody else's modeling. Or they're, like they're kind of following the market. And they're saying, we're going to put this line here because we have this resolving in this way. But we also think that the action is going to come in this way. So we think that we're going to be in an advantageous position. And that can kind of create some opportunities for us as bettors. And it can create some opportunities for you, obviously, where you're saying, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, this spot doesn't really make sense. I don't really understand how you got to this number. And looking at your own modeling, looking at your own projections, what have you. And one of the things to keep in mind with this is that there are key numbers that are critically important with the NFL. And I think that they're more important with the NFL than really any other sport. NBA, I don't super believe in key numbers for NBA, but there is some data that indicates that there are certain numbers that seem to happen slightly more often. And even from like the eye test, I think that's accurate. I think that like 7 seems to be a number where teams stop fouling. They're like, you know what, we're good. We're not going to come back. We're down 7. We're not going to foul late in the game, what have you. You do get some single possession games where it's 1, 2, or 3 points. And I think that kind of matters too. You're saying like, look, I think this team is going to win by more than 1 possession. So there are some opportunities there. But when we look at the NFL, it's so much more like obvious, right? And we always think about it and say like, oh, like they're going to win by a field goal, so that's 3. Or they're going to win by a touchdown, that's 6 or 7, or maybe even 8 now, right? Or it's going to be a 2-score game. People go, that's 10, or 2 touchdowns, that's 14. Everybody kind of knows those numbers, right? And the reason that I say this is that, number one, that's not really the way scoring works, because you see team like you'll have, say, like -7, and your team will put up a touchdown, and then you'll go against another team that puts up like 3 field goals, and it's like, this is problematic. Like, this didn't work out the way that we thought. So there are like obviously some intricacies in the NFL where the scoring is not like linear. You're getting different scores for different point allocations based on what you do. So that's always definitely something interesting. And then obviously, like, the NFL has changed over the past couple of years. Point after are a lot more difficult, where they backed up the extra point line. You see a lot more teams going for 2. You're seeing the inclusion of a little bit of more like data driven analytical model saying like go for 2 more often, go on 4th down more often. And those things all have mattered, and they've all changed a little bit of the circumstances. So I just wanted to have like a little bit of a key number refresher for you guys, obviously, because I think it's important when we see these lines. And like I signaled the other day in the huddle, and I said I want under 51 points for Bills Miami for the Thursday night game. We're at 49 now. People are like, are we still good at 50.5? And I have to say no, because it's just a dramatically different line. When you look at the totals, right? So 51, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but 51 is the 3rd most common frequency in terms of a total. So when people say like, are you good at 50.5? It's not the same as like when I give out a prop and I say like, yeah, like I want Desmond Bain over 18.5 points, and somebody goes, is it okay at 19.5? It's just a dramatically different circumstance because of the way that these numbers are distributed and the way that the scoring is happening. So I want to talk about the NFL first, and I'm going to talk about the spreads, because I think that people care a little bit more about spreads off the rip, right? So 3 is obviously the most common number. You have a lot of games resolved, they're tied, Team kicks a field goal to win it. 3 is the most common number to resolve a game since 2003. Then you're followed by totals of 7, 6, and 10 over like this grouping of games, right? And I'm grabbing all these stats from the Action Network. And when you look at this, there's a couple things going into play. Obviously, the scoring, I think, is like enhanced over the past couple of years. Like you're seeing higher scoring games, you're seeing an explosion of offense, etc. And that kind of changes the distribution of points. Like you're not seeing as many like lower scoring games, and because you're not seeing as many lower scoring games, you're not seeing as many margins that are like 3, for example, or 7 or 6, whatever. You can see a couple more margins that are a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. You see teams going for 2 because they need to catch up, whatever. And those are all some important things to keep in mind. But when you are betting on these games, like I like the Seahawks -3 this week. And the line's been moving between 3, 3.5, whatever. And 3.5 is a dramatically different bet than -3. And it's funny because like you'll go to buy the point, right? Like let's say you want to go buy the point. If you can buy the point from like -115 to -110 or something like that for -3 versus 3.5, great buy because of the like frequency of games ending at 3. But then like people are like, well, like I want to buy like 4.5. I want to buy 5.5. It's a bad buy because you're usually spending about like 15 cents, 20 cents per bet. Per number, and the frequency change is not worth it. So that's always something to keep in mind. So like when you're looking at some of these alt lines, some of these different numbers, you always need to consider it's like, okay, like sure, like maybe I'm getting a better number, but is it worth the buy? And that particularly happens like with teasers, for example. So I know like a lot of people like to do teasers. They're fun. Personally, like if you can't do a long teaser, I don't really think they're super worth it. I think you should just bet like alt lines, try to get them over key numbers, whatever. But if you are going to bet teasers, one thing that you just absolutely shouldn't do is tease through 0. So what that means is like if you have a favorite that's like, let's say there's a favorite -2. The Dolphins, perfect example. Dolphins are -2.5 for this Thursday night game. If you like the Dolphins, you shouldn't tease them through. You shouldn't tease them because you're going to get -2 to like what -3.5, 4, like 4, whatever it is. It's a terrible tease. You're taking them through 0, which is a number that, like if you bet the money line, like the odds that a team ties are just atrocious. And most games don't really resolve at 1 or 2 points. So it's a terrible tease. So you're taking them through like 2.5. Like you're basically just killing your value because you're taking them through 2 and 1 and 0 on one side, and then like 1 and 2 on the other side. It's just awful value. So you really shouldn't be doing that. And when you're looking at teasers, like I like to try to get a scenario where I'm taking them through key numbers, but then at the same time, like the way that these books have priced them, 6-point teasers used to be -110. Now you're seeing -120, -130 even. It's truly just like not worth it for a lot of these teasers on conventional books. And I think that you'd be better off picking on teams where you say like, all right, this team's listed at like -5.5. I'm going to take them at -6.5. I'm going to pay the extra juice and I'll create like my own quote unquote teaser if you really need to. To me, that I think makes a lot more sense. But we all kind of know what the value numbers, the key numbers are for NFL in terms of sides, like the 3s, the 6, 7, 10, 14, whatever. The one that I think is a lot more difficult to remember on a daily basis, right, are the totals. And I think that totals are a lot more important because totals are a market where like you look at and you're like, all right, like there was an injury. I want to take over or under. Like this is how it's going to affect it. as opposed to saying like, all right, well, like this random linebacker got hurt. How does this affect the spread? Or this wide receiver got hurt. How does this affect the spread? Or the weather got jacked up. Like, how does this affect the spread? And I think a lot of times it affects the total a lot more often. So when we look at totals, 41 is the most common outcome. 40 is the second most common outcome. 51 is the third most common outcome. And then we're looking at 47 after that. So we do have a pretty good grouping in like the 40s to low 50s range, between like low 40s, mid 40s, and then about 50, right? And the reason I think this is important to talk about is like when you see a total pop and you see like 50.5, you need to remember the fact that like 50 is a really common outcome. It's the seventh most common outcome, but also 51 is the third most common outcome. So when you're getting like a number like that, it should affect and it should impact the way that you bet into these markets. If you get a 51 where you're looking at this and you're saying like, all right, well, like two of the most common outcomes, one of them I'm pushing at, another one I'm winning at, great. Like if you get like 45 or 44.5, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 most common outcomes, if you want to bet an under, that you are slightly over those numbers. So like all those things are important. Like when you're looking at key numbers, it's about your outs. And it's about saying like, all right, well, like I'm betting on this side, I'm betting on this total, whatever. These are my best outs in terms of the scenario. Like these are all the spots that I think I can make money on based on the frequency, based on the totals, based on what we are seeing historically. Those are some of the things that you want to consider, because you want to make sure that you are putting yourself in an optimal position. So like if you see a total open at, let's say 50, let's say 50.5, and you think the total's going over, you would love to get a 50 instead. Like you would really like to try to get a 50, because at least a 50 is one of those common outcomes and you're getting a push there. If you see a 50.5 and you're saying like, I really want this game to go under, you're really looking for a 51.5. And that's what happened with this Bills Dolphins game. And like, look, maybe we lose. That's not really the point. The point is the process of this. And part of why I wanted this under is that the Bills have been doing a lot more running. They look like they're in a little bit more of a run-heavy offense. I do like Kincaid in this game from a props perspective. I do think he's going to have a good game. I do think that he was getting swarmed a little bit in their opener, but not really the point of this exercise. When I looked at that number and I saw the 51, I was like, 51 is super common outcome. And I like the under anyway, based on what Buffalo has shown as like what they're trying to really do, right? They're trying to run the ball. They're trying to establish the run. And to me, this was an under or nothing game. So when I saw 51, it was a much better bet than a 50.5 or even a under 50. So that was kind of the way that I was looking at it. If I was looking for an over, let's say it opened at 49.5. I'd want it immediately. And I wanted, because if I wanted an over, I know that 50 and 51 are key numbers. So like I want it right away, because maybe this line after the opener, which, you know, a lot of times they're soft, moves to like 52. Then it's dramatically less valuable than that 49. And it doesn't seem like a lot. Like when you're looking at these totals, it's not the same as like an NBA total, or like let's call it an NBA team total, because that's a little bit closer to what we're talking about in terms of like the number, right? It's not the same because of the way the scoring is in the NFL. Like the scoring is based on these like chunks. It's not like 2, 2, 2, 1, 3, whatever. Here it's like 3, 7. That's what it is. So you're looking at all these intervals, and all of those things kind of matter when you're betting on NFL totals. So again, 41 points, the most common score. 40, 51, 47, 44. Keep those numbers in mind, because you're going to see lines moving up and down, up and down, up and down. And sometimes it's not best to bet right away. And it's better to wait, see how the line matures. Obviously, some people we can't all bet our max amounts on openers. It's a thing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But we can try to start establishing a position where it's like, hey, I want the over. Maybe I can only get a unit down on this right now. I think the line's going to move. I think it's worth it. So you put a unit down, line moves. Maybe it's unbettable. But on the contrary, maybe you move to a point that it went past every key number and you're like, we're actually looking at an under opportunity now, and you could try to shoot for a little bit of a middle. So just a little bit of food for thought in terms of NFL sides, totals, what have you. I did want to talk about what happened here with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, because the Massachusetts Gaming Commission had a meeting today. They tried to have one in May, and in May, really nobody showed up. But today they had Bally's, MGM, DraftKings, Fanatics, FanDuel, Penn, whatever. And one of the biggest questions and the biggest points of this meeting was to talk about how are you limiting patrons? How are you affecting their user experience? How are you impacting whatever they do, right? How are you affecting them even though this is legal in our state? How and why a patron may be limited. MGM talked about a small group of advantage players. That's direct quote. And they said it lets MGM offer more markets to the larger population of non-advantage players. And essentially, it's a small minority of people. They are capitalizing on errors, syndicate betting, wagering inconsistent amounts. So that when they say wagering inconsistent amounts, that's a hallmark of arbitrage betting. That's really what they're getting at, right? And they're going to factor all of that into your max. And they said so there's a couple things there, right? They're saying are you looking for line errors, where they put up a bad line? It's just egregiously bad. Are you betting with a group? And when they call it syndicate betting, it's basically is somebody signaling this? Is somebody coming in there? Are there multiple people with basically beard accounts, big accounts coming in and saying we're going to bet on this line, whatever, and then wagering inconsistent amounts? So if you're betting, I don't know, let's say your unit's $100 for whatever. If your unit's $100 and that's the way they're looking at your account, and then all of a sudden you start betting 185.45, and then the next bet's 143.23, and then the next bet's 208.75, and they're gonna be what the fuck are you doing? It's a decent sign of arbitrage betting where you are looking and saying all right, well, if I bet this here and this somewhere else, I'm gonna be making a little bit of money, guaranteed. The key that I think that MGM talked about was they said it's not results driven. And they said a casual can actually still become an advantage better, because they said it's about 24-hour monitoring. There's no real definition in it. And it's interesting. It feels like a catch-all. It feels like a nothing when they're saying that. But what they're really saying is that they want to be able to flag you for any reason because they think they can't understand your action, right? So I think, and we talked about this the other day, was one of the things that I think is great, with the legalization of sports betting, is that you have a little bit of an ability to disguise your behavior. You're able to disguise some of your betting. If for the most part you're super sharp, but on NFL Sundays you love throwing in an anytime touchdown parlay, those are some of the things that you can do to kind of disguise your account. But MGM saying we're still looking at everything. FanDuel says something similar. They said that they're looking for people to pick off bad prices, or they're court siding, which court siding basically means that you're literally sitting at the event and you're beating them to updating the lines. And the reason that they say that's a problem is because they're saying that they take bets on 270 events per day and they have to protect themselves. Honestly, court siding, I understand. I get where they're getting at, where they're look, we're hanging these lines. People are watching it on TV. What are we supposed to do, right? They do say though, of quote, very limited set of users gets limited. 0.04% of people are betting at the max. Like, why are we using specific limits then, as opposed to general limits, if 0.4% of people are betting at the max? I get that not, and that's the other thing. That's accounting for the fact that they have flexible wagering. And what by flexible wagering, I mean that like they don't have the same max for everybody. Like my max isn't your max. And that lets them, they said that lets them offer more markets. And like, look, I kind of understand that. But like at the same time, it's like, all right, like if you want to offer like a really niche market, like let's say you want to offer, I don't know, like Belarusian pickleball, just make your limit $50. If you don't want the action, just make your limit $50. It's not a big deal. Instead, they want to say like, all right, well, like Joe's limit's like $3 because he doesn't fucking lose. But this bozo's limit is like 25 grand because we don't care. Like we know he's going to lose. That's flexible wagering. DraftKings talked about the behavior as well, kind of similar. And then Fanatics also said that the people that are limited are like sub percentages of players. So like minuscule, like FanDuel, 0.04%. The problem is that like there are so many people that have signed up for these sports books that like you would say like, yeah, like that's 0.4%. But I'd want to know a little bit more about like on the people that use it daily, what is the percentage then? Those are some of the things that weren't totally fleshed out in this gaming commission meeting. Not everybody bets on sports every day. Some people only open it up on Sundays. And I think that that's the thing that's so important, right? Because Caesars talked about this a little bit. Caesar said some markets are just lower. The liquidity is not endless. And some markets have a lower risk tolerance and there can be collusion amongst customers and syndicates. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that they specifically said NFL drafter awards are offered, quote, offered for customer enjoyment. Don't expect to win. We want to keep those markets up, but there are people who will take advantage of them. That's us, guys. We take advantage of them, but that's not the point. So the reason I say this, though, is that like they're saying like, oh, this is for fun. This is for this is for that. Like that's what your experience should be. Like, could you know what's like they're literally saying they're putting up a market and they're saying these are for customer enjoyment. Do not expect to win. I think that's the first time that they said the quiet part out loud. Do not expect to win. Because the vast majority of customers are trying to bet on their favorite teams and players. Does that not say it all? The majority of these markets, like obviously, like we know, like it's us versus them. Like this isn't rocket science. Like they're trying to beat you. They want you to lose your money. But like when they put it like that, that tells you a lot about like these one-way markets. They're putting up there because they're just like, we're going to put them up. People are going to bet on them. They're going to lose money because of the way the hold is. They also know that people want to bet on their favorite players. So like you're going to get the Lakers tax. You're going to get the Knicks tax. You're going to get the Super Bowl, like the Super Bowl champs tax, right? The Chiefs tax, right? You're going to get any of those. And the reason it's important to talk about that is that like you need to include that in your betting. You need to include that in your analysis. And you need to remember it's like these markets are not meant for you to win. It's like we just saw DraftKings put up a no market for touchdowns. Like this player not to score. We just saw it happen. These books like want, like for the draft, for awards, you don't have that. There's no like, is Nikola Jokic not going to win the MVP? There's no bet for that. Maybe on some of these exchanges, which is like a new thing, right? Like it's becoming more prevalent. That's maybe an option. But the sports books are like, no, like we're not going to offer that. We're just going to give you shitty lines on everybody. the windup is that like there still is an edge to be had based on like actual analysis, actual capping, actual information. And that's the issue with them offering these lines. That's why they don't want to do it, because they're going to be like, oh, well, like there are actually people that are in the space that can get information that they don't have before that event. Because it'll be like, all right, like who's getting drafted with like the 6th pick? Who's getting drafted with the 7th? Like who are the Memphis Grizzlies taking? Like what's the situation? And when you actually read the room, when you talk to people, it becomes a little bit different. It's not just based on like who's good or who's this or who's that. It's like, no. Like the people are saying this. Like the people that are making the decisions in the room are saying this. And sometimes you can beat the book to that. And that's why they don't want to offer you good prices. So like part of it's that. And then the other part of it is that like there was a really interesting quote that it was a guy from Prime Sports says, Joe Brennan of Prime Sports. And he said, basically, I want to get the actual quote. I want to read what it was. And what he said was that, or no, it was Schultz, a better voice, rather. He said that, good follow. Schultz said, Schwetz, sorry if I'm mispronouncing, but he said, we're talking about a fundamentally different industry. We took action from Billy Waters, who beat us, but was a valuable customer because he allowed them to risk manage. We are no longer in a risk management business, but the risk avoidance business. And that is the critical thing. That's why you don't have two-way markets on everything. That's why you have these crazy holds on things. That is the most important comment, I think, that I heard from the customer side, from the consumer side, because he's basically saying that, like, look, it's not even about winning anymore. It's just about, like, we don't want to lose, right? Like, the sportsbooks are saying these people have these edges or these sides, and they're saying, like, oh, no, we don't like what that guy's doing. Like, we see what's happening here. We don't want any part of that. And Fanatics said in their side, nearly half of the people being limited are net losers at the time of limiting because they focus on behaviors, not outcomes. So when you think about that, it's about like your behavior. It's like, are you hitting unders constantly? Are you hitting like really niche markets? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And they're basically just like, oh no, we don't want this guy betting WNBA unders. Absolutely not. No chance. We want no part of that. Because like they don't feel like they can book it properly. FanDuel talks about limits, and they were saying like, yeah, like we tell everybody what their limits are, because like you can look in the market, like when you type it in how much you want to bet, it tells you that you're limited. Yeah. You ever log in to FanDuel and just type in like a bunch of 9s so you can see what your limit is on a particular bet? Then you log out and you type in the same number of 9s and the number is dramatically different. They're not like super transparent with how much they're limiting. And the issue here is that these books are basically saying that like, we're going to limit you because we think that you're like acting suspiciously, you have like some weird edge, like whatever. They just don't want your action because they feel like you're beating them. And the one guy from FanDuel said it. He said the quiet part out loud, Corey Fox. He said, essentially, they limit customers who have a better model or they're arbitraging. And like, we'll get into the arbitraging in a minute, but like, they're basically saying like, if you have a better model than us, we don't want it. We can tell because of the way your activity is. We just don't want it. So, you know, he basically wasn't saying that like you're cheating or like you're an asshole. Like he's just like, you're better than us. We don't want it. Which is hilarious when you think about the people that can say they bet a shitload of money on FanDuel. When FanDuel is basically like, oh no, if you have a better model than us, we don't want it. They're like the one sportsbook that was like, if you're better than us, we don't want it. If you're not, give it to us, right? It's interesting because like then you talk about like there was some conversation about like the VIP model for gambling. And like you talk about these people that come in and they're like, oh, like I'm a VIP, blah, blah, blah. A lot of it has to do with your handle. So it's not really about like, are you winning? Are you losing? You're probably losing. Like they're just like, your handle's great. And not only is your handle great, but based on everything else they said, your activity as a bettor to them, showing that like even if you got one over them, like let's say you've won over the past year, like you're awesome, like you're way up on FanDuel over the past year. They looked at your activity, they looked at your handle, and they said, bet you're not going to keep that up. And that's how you became a VIP. So we're talking about a situation where you're like, if you don't move lines almost like automatically because like these books are tracking you, then like it's not really that you're super sharp. It's that like when you post the play, then like that's creating sharp movement, right? Like because it's an algorithm, and these books are basically saying like we're gonna move because like we're getting way too much action on one side. So like they track more for like NFL, NBA, like for total, like for real, like for sides, totals, whatever. They're looking for sharp action, especially NFL. As the lines mature, as they start seeing like where the market's moving, they're like, oh, like, this person bet it on this side. Like they put 30 grand down. I don't care that we have 100 grand down on the public. This guy who's super sharp put it on this side. Let's move against him. Let's move it the other way. And we'll give the public a better number because like we'd rather fight the public at even a higher handle than this guy at a better number than whatever you bet at. So when this guy, Joe Brennan of Prime Sports, he was talking and he said that they track certain players and they said like they adjust their lines because basically like if you don't know what the good players are doing, like do you have a good product? That was essentially the quote. And he talked about how these publicly traded corporations like FanDuel, DraftKings, etc., they're pushing same game parlays because they want more player prop markets. And he used the quote stocking stuffers because of like the margin that they can put on them. And I don't totally disagree with him in terms of like the categorization of the player prop market. And you guys know, like I'm a great, like this is what we do. I'm a great player prop bettor. The difference is like, and I tweeted the like, I don't know, like maybe a couple weeks ago about how DraftKings like has a higher hold. Like you're looking at like minus 115 on each side. And that's like, realistically, it's not market standard. Like we're seeing Bet365, they have minus 110s on both sides. FanDuel, you know, sometimes you'll see like minus 112s, Bet Rivers, same thing, like whatever. The reason I'm saying this is that those player prop markets are interesting because they're much more difficult for books to model off of because number one, they have way less data in terms of like the history of their data and how the lines move, how people react to the information and how they bet across it. Secondly, the reason it's not great for them is that like they have to manage a number of different things. Like I said before, there's like the Lakers tax, there's the Knicks tax, there's the Chiefs tax. You have to apply that to player props. Like there is a superstar tax on player props, like Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic. Like those guys have a superstar tax because they're so good, and the props are always like a little high. Like they're like one high or like a 1.5 high, and you want to bet it under. People don't want to bet unders on their favorite players, and they know that. And when you include them in a same game parlay, where you're like right now, if I go on DraftKings, I can only bet overs on WNBA props. Like I have no unders options. When you do that, you're creating a situation and a market where you can completely dictate the hold. It's not good for bettors. It's not good for us. And the fact that they called them, Brennan of Prime Sports called them stocking stuffers. Stocking stuffers for DraftKings, stocking stuffers for FanDuel, stocking stuffers for MGM, whatever. That's a problem. And that's something that they're trying to take advantage of. And the thing is, like, they're starting to see sharp bettors like really attach themselves to those markets, like us. We make a lot of money betting on player props. But like, we have a lot of people listening to this podcast. We have a lot of people following me on Twitter. There's a way more people that bet on sports than that. And like the best we can do is like keep sharing this, subscribing it, whatever. But these operators know that like there's no way for people to really encapsulate this. They're basically saying that like we don't care that like a couple of you are profitable. We'll just limit you. Overall, we're making a ton of money on these people betting player prop overs because almost nobody wants to bet an under, let alone on their favorite player. And if they don't know who the fuck it is, they're definitely not betting on that prop either. So even when there's like an auto mover, like an algorithm to move the price, it still creates a scenario where they just don't really want to give you a good line. So one of the things that was talked about on social media was about like how arbitragers, could get limited based on like what the operators are saying, like based on what I was saying before, how they look for like the unusual wagering amounts. But at the same time, it's like if you're like a respected book, you shouldn't care. Like you should want action on both sides. You should feel like you're handling this right and that you're going to get, even if somebody bets like $5,000 on one side, shouldn't really matter because you're going to get plenty of action on the other side because you set a good line. And that's not the way that they're trying to handle it. Like they just don't want the risk. They don't want the action. They basically only want public action. And they want misinformed action. So, it really does lead to a scenario where you're looking at this and you're saying, like, why should we let the sports books control the consumer experience? And part of it is that, like, sure, like they have the ability to offer different lines. And like there is some level of like, all right, like these legal books are offering you some better protections, right? Like you can withdraw pretty much at will. You are getting maybe more markets, like whatever. But not to promote like offshore or locals or whatever, but like there's a lot of markets out there. You can get down on what you want to get down on. You just have to have your outs. And I think that's at the end of the day the most important thing. Regardless of where you are, you want to have as many outs as possible. You want to have as many ways to get down your action as you can. And that's why, like, if you're in a state that has legalized sports betting, you want to be able to open up as many books as you can because, like, you're going to say, like, all right, well, like, I can get down a little bit here. I can get down some here. I can get down some here. I can disguise my action here. I can do this. I can do this. And that's the best way to maintain account longevity, account health, and keep you profitable. So the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, they're having some more meetings about this. We'll talk about this on the pod. But at the end of the day, you do need to understand that like these sportsbooks want to make money off of you. And your best tool is not only to line shop, obviously, but is to understand some of the games that they're playing and understand like how they operate, right? So like I said, with like player props or with teams that you're paying a tax for, if they're going to do that because they know they're going to get public action, maybe you can fade it a little bit the other way. And that's your way to be profitable in some of these scenarios. So we'll keep an eye on this. It's really interesting. And remember, obviously, just because you're a VIP doesn't mean shit. You might be losing money. Now for pods and recs, it's been an interesting week. It's been a busy week. It's been a little bit chaotic. I had a tweet about some wines. I do like this Cooper and Thief wine. I think it's good. It's like $30 a bottle. It's not bad. They're aged in bourbon barrels. I love bourbon, so like it's a little bit of a different experience, a little bit of good experience. Like I don't know. I like it's a good wine. It's a good wine option for like $30. You can drink a bottle. It's no big deal. Besides that, I'm going to recommend. I got this coffee at Starbucks. It's like an apple crisp oat milk shaken. It's too many words. Number one, apple crisp oat milk shaken espresso, and it's fantastic. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I did see like they had like an apple crisp macchiato, and I want to try that too. I feel like I saw something that said macchiatos are millennial, and I feel seen a little bit. I'm not a big macchiato guy, but like I will have one every so often. So I did notice that, but it's that like appley season of the year. I had my buddy Tay he brought over like the Sam Adams seasonal like mixed box of beers. So you got a couple different ones in there. Like this is a great time for beer, cider, anything like that. And like if you can get that like apple crisp type of feel, like like it's getting a little chillier. It's a great opportunity to really test out your fall palate. Um, Additionally, I'm one of those guys like I love I love it to be freezing when I'm sleeping. Like it's not super cold in Jersey right now, but obviously but at nighttime it does get cold, and I like to just shut off the heat like entirely, shut off the heat, AC, whatever. And I love like waking up. It'll be like 60 degrees in the house, and it is like my favorite thing. Um, it's not great, like for my wife. I don't think she loves it, but like she does like it cold. But I do wake up, like I'll wake up at like 5, take the dogs out and turn the heat on. But like it is so nice. I love sleeping in just like the absolute Arctic. It's the best. Like if I'm close to hypothermia, injected into my veins. So yeah, so that was this week's episode. Do have some fun ones lined up though for NBA season. We're gonna have a nice conversation with Dan Titus from Yahoo Fantasy, and we're gonna be talking about the NBA draft for your fantasy drafts, for dynasty drafts. It's gonna be a really good time, and we will continue to put out that good content, keep you guys apprised of the newest NBA information, and we will continue to cash that.